Okay, good afternoon, all. My name is Tim Dolan, and I want to welcome you all to today's webinar. It's just about 12 o'clock, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm sure people will join on as in the next couple of minutes. I'm Tim Dolan. I'm with the Inclusive Housing Coalition. I hope everybody's having a wonderful holiday season so far. We're pleased to present today's webinar. We have two great presenters discussing the housing development process. Um, we have webinars every quarter, and we are very thankful to our webinar series sponsor, Developmental Pathways. Um, so please be aware that we are recording today's webinar, and that will be available on our website, ihccolorado.org, in a couple of days, as well as the slides. So with that, I think I will invite Mary Anderies to go ahead and share her slides and begin the presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Anderies. I've worked as an affordable housing consultant for over 30 years and have specialized in senior and housing for persons with disabilities. I also mentor a couple of groups of students who are interested in the development process and take on a sample project to play it out. And that's been a good opportunity to kind of play out some of the issues that folks who are going to be developing housing for persons with IDD or autism are going to run into. So what I'm going to present today is a know before you go. If you use a bowling analogy, gutter balls are very expensive. And so, what are the ways you can put up bumpers to avoid that and to start out with an experienced team so that you can get the pins down. So I'm going to share my screen here. And this is an overview that I presented to my real estate diversity initiative students, most of whom are in professional capacities, but don't have a broad overview of development. So this slide just talks about the need for persons in general to have affordable housing. Certainly for our folks, it's even more critical. If they're spending 30% of their income on housing, that's well under $3,000 a month, which is well under what it costs to operate that building and provide utilities. So we're going to take a look at what some of the main funding sources are. If you've been in development, you've heard it talked about as a stacked wedding cake. I see it more as a carefully balanced Jenga tower. If you pull out the wrong piece, the whole thing collapses. The main tools that you have for reaching affordability are income housing, low-income housing tax credits, the ones that reach the deepest and give you the most bang for your buck in reaching the lowest incomes are the 9% tax credits. They are very competitive. You apply through CHFA. I've given you the next rounds. This last year they did 2 rounds. Typically they only do 1. And you get a good boost in building in what they call a qualified census tract or difficult to develop area. And those are published each year and do change each year. So make sure that you're up to date on that. Currently, the cap that CHFA has established is 1.6 million times 10 years. And because of this cap, you have a sweet spot. And it's really important to be aware of that sweet spot of 40 to 60 units. If you get much below 40 and you've got a vacancy, you are in non-compliance. with your rental income. Over 60, you're going to have to really beef up other additional subsidies. And your income targets are 30 to 60% AMI. You are allowed to go up to 80% AMI with income averaging. But the feedback I've gotten from most property managers is that the 80% is not terribly competitive with what people can find out in the open market, and they're difficult to rent up. And your investor is going to fund somewhere around 75% of your basis. Basis is what it costs to build, does not include land costs, and does not include a number of your development costs. So the next one that you can use is the 4% LIHTC. It is non-competitive, but you have to pair it with private activity bonds. Private activity bonds you can get through your local allocation. You can reach out to other entities that are not using their allocation, and CHFA has some allocation. Again, qualified census tract gives you a 30% boost, which helps if you're in that area. There's no cap on the 4%, but you do have to keep in mind the issue around private activity bonds. The credit multiplier, if you're looking at old pro formas, it fluctuated. It's now fixed at 4%. And it has a sweet spot of 100, 200, however many units you can pull together. Same kind of income targeting. You're not going to reach very many folks who are in the 30% AMI. And again, there are the same problems with the 80% AMI. And investors are going to step in and fund about 45% of the costs. Now, there is a state housing tax credit. It is competitive. You apply through CHFA. It's got 2 rounds, and you must pair it with either a 4% or a 9% LIHTC. The 9% LIHTC pairing is fairly new. And again, your qualified census tract boost may apply. So there are caps for each project, depending on whether it's a 4% or a 9%, and you take that times 6 years. Same kind of income targeting. This is going to allow you to reach down and pick up more of those 30 to 40% AMIers. And investors fund 15 to 20% of costs. As kind of a rule of thumb, I say it's about half of what you get out of a 4% deal. So there are other funding sources that you should be looking at. There are solar and energy tax credits. Division of Housing has both federal and supportive housing funds for services. Those are primarily targeted to folks who are homeless. And they do have project-based vouchers. The Section 811 program is one that they manage now. And it's one of the few that allows you to target a particular population. However, it does come with a caution that only 25% of your individuals can have, your individuals with disabilities can have project-based vouchers. That doesn't prevent someone with a tenant-based voucher from moving in, but it doesn't allow you to have 100% of your development get vouchers for people with IDD. They have monthly applications. They want to see a local match, and grant maximums are typically 40,000 a unit. I've seen them go higher. I've seen them go lower. Your city and county is going to have home and CDBG grants available. There's also other local funding, particularly with the passage of um, the 1, 2, 3 affordable housing funding. Federal Home Loan Bank is a good source. They are very competitive. Call and find out what last year's minimum scores were and self-score at the end of their information on their program. Project maximum right now is at 1.5 million and also a maximum per unit of 75,000. Applications are usually due in the fall with notice by the end of the year. And here are a few more things that you can check out for funding. Colorado Health Foundation will help, particularly when you're incorporating healthy living. Land donations can come from your city. Particularly if you're doing a large project, I would talk with the Urban Land Conservancy about holding the land for you. Built into any pro forma is a deferred developer fee. It's basically you or the developer's profit. And you can pledge up to 80% of that for one of your sources. Historic tax credits are a good opportunity. Special improvement districts, urban renewal districts, and elevation land trust are all things that you can take a look at and begin to build your Jenga stack. I'm going to go real quickly through structure. And the reason this is important is that you end up at the top with your LLLP, which is a for-profit entity that owns 100% of the development. And it's really important that if you are going to phase your development, that you understand this structure, because even if you've got the same parties participating, it can be difficult to layer in easements or roads or whatever later on. So starting at the bottom, this is based on Atlantis Community Foundation, which is 100% owned nonprofit. It sets up a for-profit entity of Atlantis Holding and owns a minimal amount of the ownership. You also want to bring in your housing authority, and oftentimes they will have a particular portion of their authority which deals with development. They come in with a minimal special limited partner role, and this gives you then property tax exemption. Your investor is the one that's bringing in the majority of the funding, and all three then create the ownership structure. You, as the nonprofit or for-profit or other developer, are going to manage the property. So long term, you need to be thinking about how you're going to manage and how you can play by the various LIHTC rules. So I'm not going to go through this real deeply, but it basically says as you're calculating your basis and what the investors are using, it basically covers construction costs and developer fee. It does not include land or a number of your financing costs. So if you're doing a 9% deal and it's a $10 million project and you're doing 100% of the units as affordable, then you come down with your total basis. And this particular one is in a qualified census tract, so it gets a 30% boost. and your credit multiplier for 9% is 0.09. So you come down then to your estimated credit, and you're going to be shopping for your price per dollar from your investor. I've seen it as low as 80 cents on the dollar and as high as 110 cents on the dollar. So you take that times 10 years, and equity that you're generating is $11 million. But then you have to just double check on your not to exceed that Chaffa sets, which is currently at 1.6 times 10 years. Real similar calculation for the 4% credits. The major difference here is that, again, you're looking at what your investor's willing to fund per dollar of investment. And you're also going to look at your credit multiplier, which is 0.04 or the 4%. So that's going to get you about $4.9 million. You can see it's significantly less than the 9% credit. And that's going to impact how low you can go on your AMI rents. And then the state credit, again, is very similar. Your credit multiplier is just under 3%. And what your investor is willing to pay is about 0.67 or 67 cents on the dollar. And one of the reasons for that is that it is a 6-year investment. And you do have not to exceeds here times the 6 years. So what are your funding speed bumps? Federal funds and vouchers, depending on the program, between 8 and 12 units trigger relocation for an existing building, triggers Davis-Bacon wage rates. If you've got a building over 4 stories, or you make commercial along all of the first floor, even though you're only 4 stories, you are triggering higher Davis-Bacon rates, sometimes called building rates, sometimes called commercial rates. And that's going to bump your costs up, your labor costs by 20–25%. So if half of that's your overall cost, you've bumped your overall cost by 10%. You are going to have requirements around Section 3 hiring and requirements around bidding. There are ways to deal with commercial, but you need to be careful. At a 4% deal, you could have 10% commercial and not trigger Davis-Bacon building rates, but just be really careful. And you probably are going to have to condo it if you're going above 10%. You're probably very aware of the condominium issues in Colorado right now with the developer and contractor liable for latent defects for up to 8 years. And, if you're holding on to the building, it's less of an issue. If you have to provide insurance for that, it's about $60,000 a door. It is not cheap. You do have accessibility requirements no matter what you're building. Typically, it's been 5% fully accessible and ground floor and any units that you can reach by elevator having to be usable. You can get in, you can get out, you can use the unit. Recently, DOH has entered into a voluntary agreement to bump their fully accessible requirements to 10%. So keep that in mind if you're using Division of Housing funding. And, keep an eye on income and regulatory requirements as those do change. Here are some helpful websites if you want to know more and you want to find out what's involved in an application process. And then this slide is comparing differences between market and affordable. Often times with market, you're going to have higher finishes and amenities. The rents are set by market, but Denver does have an affordable housing requirement on market developments. Longer rent up time, be aware it's going to take you longer to get out of your construction phase and into permanent. The developer often sells right after construction versus with the affordable, they're going to sell in year 15. Most of the nonprofit deals that I've done, when the developer sells, they give back the property to the original nonprofit. But I have heard of mostly for-profit developers that are asking for a sale price when they bow out. You're going to have lower loan to value ratios on a market deal. The loan often is recourse back to the individual and not just the corporation. You're going to look at what profits the developer can make versus the developer fee calculation, which is a fixed calculation on the affordable side. Property taxes are going to get triggered. You're going to have less access to grant and soft funds. And if you can structure it so there's no federal funds, then you don't have Davis-Bacon Section 3 or relocation. This is very hard to see, but you can pull up the slide that'll be posted. There are a number of places that you can go to really dive deep into what LIHTC is. The one that does not cost you anything is the CHAFA Developer Guide, which is online. CHAFA also has a Housing Professionals Institute, and that link is there. If you are a woman or minority, you can participate in the Real Estate Diversity Program through Urban Land Institute. And then they do have a number of online modules. Novogradic is an awesome resource. There is a charge for each of their portions of development. Roger Hara is a consultant that's been around forever, and he does once-a-year classes. You have to apply, tell him why you're interested, and bring a bottle of Irish or Scotch whiskey as your payment for the class. So there are a couple of others here. Some of them cost, some of them don't. But this gives you a good start if you want to dive deeply without getting into a development class at a university. So I think the only thing I forgot to mention was that the 811 program, which is a good source for vouchers through Division of Housing, is now funding those vouchers at fair market rent. So it's advantageous to use it, but they will limit your project to 25% of the development serving persons with disabilities. So that, in a nutshell, in 24 minutes, gives you an overview before you make what can be some very expensive mistakes down the road. And that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a great overview of the development process. Obviously, there is a lot of information there. And so these slides will be available on for all presentations, and actually for all of our webinars will be available on the IHC website in probably a day or two. And so for the second part of our presentation today, I'm going to ask Paul Brady to go ahead and share his screen, introduce himself, and walk us through his presentation.
Thank you. All right. Uh, so thank you guys. Great presentation, Mary. I'm gonna share the results of a housing charrette that Mary and I both participated in this year, and it's been an ongoing program, at least for I think 10 or 12 years now. It's put on by both Housing Colorado and CU Denver, their College of Architecture and Planning. Um, each year they pick three sites. They try to do like an urban, a rural, and like a greater Colorado site. Um, do that pre-design on it. And this year we worked on a site in the city of Grand Junction. I just wanted to kind of mention that it brings a lot of different participants into the room. Um, so while I'm able to share this today, it's the benefit or it's the compilation of many people's work. Um, so what is a charrette? It's getting all those people into a room and coming up with a schematic design for the site. And so there's a lot of talking, a lot of drawing, and just refinement of project goals, project design, etc. It takes about 2.5 days, and it's a lot of work. So the Grand Junction site, um, it's just south of I-70, south of their airport. And it's in an area called Matchett Park. It's one of their four regional parks. And that park is owned by the city of Grand Junction. And they had an agreement where they were going to lease a 5-acre portion of that site to the housing authority for affordable housing. Um, the community center, it's under construction this year. There's a lot of parkland not seen to the north of the screen. And then at the south part here, they said, hey, wherever that 5 acres makes sense, explore in your design concepts and see what you'd propose. So we're interviewing all these different participants, both the city and the housing authority, and doing other research, trying to figure out what we're going to put on those 5 acres. Some things that kind of popped out is they wanted to be between 80 and 120 units. They wanted it to serve multiple populations. But most importantly, because it was within this regional park, they wanted it to um, communicate to that park and kind of fit into that context there. And so as we get into the design options, I'll show you what I mean by that. Before we do the charrette, the students from the university do some site analysis um, in addition to interviewing the different participants. And this is one of those diagrams. Um, some of the main factors that influenced the ultimate design solution was Patterson Road to the south there and a car wash to the southwest. In general, there was a lot of noise and activity there, and that contrasted with the peacefulness of the park to the north. Um, Additional part of that site analysis is the needs assessment. Um, it found that there was a demand, especially for kind of those smaller unit types, and it emphasized the huge need in the community out there. And this solution in general, I think, where the city is dedicating land to help fill that gap, I think it's a great solution. Some more surrounding context. Opposite the busy road to the south, um, there was lower density homes to the east, and that ultimately kind of influenced the layout as well. Another Grand Junction Housing Authority property, it was to the west, just a little over a block. And so that adjacency also played into it as well. Here's a view of the site. You have the great, beautiful mesas in the distance, but it was a relatively flat site, undeveloped. And you can see the busy road at the bottom of the page there. So I mentioned we kind of had free reign of that whole southern part of the site, and we did several sketches trying to figure out what the right location for the housing community would be. Ultimately, we kind of ended up with that bigger bubble on the right, where we put a buffer use to the south of the affordable housing, and then the affordable housing nestled in just north of the busy road there. A final thing with the zoning analysis or the site analysis is just zoning, and there was really no impactful zoning on this site. We had pretty permissive zoning, and that had been placed there by the city kind of in the lead up to this project. A great thing about a charrette is you get so many different stakeholders at the table. We had an individual from the engineering department, and so we were able to identify all those different drainage lines and other criteria that was going to affect this parcel of land. Also, kind of during these interviews, we were really drilling down in the parks department into what playfield or park uses they wanted in this area, and we were planning around those. And then we were also hearing from Mary and the Housing Authority the need for, if we wanted to do that many units, it would likely need to be two-phased. So now to the fun stuff. We'll go through about 3 pages of different sketches. In time, it was about a day and a half of different site explorations. The one on the left, we were putting the park all the way to the west of the site and putting the housing near the road so it was more easily accessible. And something we kept hearing was, no, that's not what we want. We want this main road coming into that community center to be a parkway. And so the other three site plans on the slide here, you can see different park uses being introduced along that parkway. And we were trying to define what that right amount of space is and what that right use was. Also, we were looking at different ways to circulate and achieve these phases. And then being multidisciplinary, we had the fire department in the charrette, and they were stressing the need for 2 points of access. So both, or really all these, is utilizing a second point of access through the car wash to the left there. We refine those ideas. You can see in the top right, those tennis courts or volleyball courts along that parkway as you come into the site. That was giving about 100-foot buffer. But then we kept looking at all this land at the top of the page, and we're just like, what do we do with that? And so ultimately we had one that really, in the bottom left of the screen there, it stretched the site plan all the way east-west and shoved it down to the bottom of the site to leave more parkland at the top there. And again, the comment came, we want that Matchett Parkway to be a parkway. And so we rotated the site plan, and voila, we kind of everything started to click, and we were really starting to um, found a solution that met all of those different needs that were identified in the site analysis. So here's that site plan refined. Something from that interview was not only the need to have that parkland next to the parkway there, but to have multiple buildings broken up and dispersed so that it felt more interwoven and compatible with the regional park. Um, the phasing of the property, we have that street coming in from Matchett Parkway about midway up down on the site. Um, and you'd have the two phases up and down above and below that street. And in total, we got 120 units on there at a blend of AMIs. We didn't go into that 80% at Mary's recommendation there. And to test out and make sure that those footprints work, the charrette even developed some schematic floor plans. Something that I've learned with several charrettes from the Grand Junction team is highlighted on plan one there on the one bedroom on the left. From resident surveys, if you can have a circulation path where you don't reach dead ends, residents feel better in their unit. So we were able to include that in that unit plan there. And then as far as funding, this takes some of Mary's slides and kind of shows it applied to this project. Some of the multidisciplinary people in the room are general contractors, and so they're helping price this somewhat accurately, asking a lot of different area measurements, etc., trying to quantify what's there. This scenario shows that 9%, but in a phased application. The next page here shows a 4%. The Housing Authority has done phased projects before, but it's challenging with the 9% because it's a competitive application, so it can take several years to get both of those awards. The 4% would allow it to all happen at once, and it's not as competitive. You just need that local piece. And you can also see at 346,000 a unit, it's a little less on a per unit basis than the 9%. But the 9% is able to just give a bigger chunk of equity to the project. And so there's costs or there's pros and cons of each option there. Ultimately, we try to put together a complete packet that can be used to get that award. So we have the site plan, the floor plans, and we get into elevation design. Here's the inspiration buildings that we use to kind of start from the Grand Junction Airport and the new rec center that was on the site. The roof line of the airport, we took that into the massing of the buildings, and then the materials and that big, again, the roof of the rec center. And so here you can see the roof line on the right. These are what those buildings would look like. There was also a desire to incorporate some murals to add interest that way as well, kind of this intersection of art and recreation. And then zooming out from a distance, you can see those buildings twisted in the site plan, allowing that park-like space between them, those varied roof forms, the different murals kind of activating the parking in the middle there, the rec center off in the distance, the play fields to the right. And then a view from below. There was a desire not to have long uninterrupted stretches of parking, and so by meandering that drive, we were able to play with view lines, and so you don't see all the parking in any one view. And then some of the spaces between those buildings, um, because there was so much regional parkland adjacent, everybody thought that these smaller, intimate, um, unique spaces in between those irregularly placed buildings was the right solution for the site. Um, and so that was the output of that design charrette. And I flew through that a little quickly, but
That's terrific, Paul. Thanks very much. So we have about 20 minutes here to take questions and comments if people would like to do that. So if you would like to, please just go ahead and there's not a whole lot of people on the call. So I think if you want to just go ahead and come off mute and ask your question, please go ahead. You can also put a question in the chat if you'd like to. That's perfectly fine too.
Hi, this is Mary. I just wanted to add one more thing to Paul's analysis of why they're looking at a two-phase project. And one of the primary motivators is that they wanted to keep the number of special needs units at 8 or below per phase so that they didn't trigger Davis-Bacon wage rates. Now, residential rates aren't that different from what the market is doing anyway. But there certainly is a brain damage factor for your contractor if they haven't dealt with it before.
Thank you, Mary. Well, once again, I'll open it up for any questions or comments folks might have.
Hi, this is Alan. I'm curious, kind of at the outset of our development processes, but when you trigger Davis-Bacon wages is on a percentage basis, do you have an idea of like how much more that is? Do the costs become 20% more expensive, or 50 or 100 or?
So if you are within the residential format, so 4 stories or under, no massive commercial on the bottom, they're going to be very similar to what the market is doing. And certainly in the metro area, the contractors are well versed in that and it doesn't scare them. But Grand Junction has had trouble with contractors being afraid of the residential rates. If you trigger the building rates, which are sometimes called commercial rates, that overall is going to increase your costs by about 10% because it's bumping your labor costs up by 15 to 20%.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Great question.
But in Grand Junction, you're finding that many more of the contractors are scared to work with Davis-Bacon wages on residential properties?
I think anywhere there is a brain damage factor in that. And some contractors are willing to do that. They've got the system set up, and some contractors are not.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Has this project been, and anybody cut me off if you have a question that you want to ask, has this project that you just charretted, is that something that's going forward, that is applying for credits, or was this more of a mental exercise?
no, it's going to be applying. I don't know if it'll apply this cycle or at a future cycle.
Okay.
And then over the history of the charrette, um, I think we've kind of looked at the success rate, and it's generally been over 50% of the projects that we do this um, community-based design. They eventually get their tax credits and get built.
That's great. That's great to hear. does anybody here have an idea of what the interest rate would be on the permanent debt for 4% or 9% financing? I mean, for 4% or 9% credit project, does the permanent debt rate vary that much?
This is a really tough time to be getting a permanent mortgage. I think you can hope that you can get 6.5%. It's a really tough time because interest rates are high. We are seeing them start to come down. But with the new elections, I wouldn't even throw a dart at a wall.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, our market rate people, we asked them if we could conceivably get a 5% debt, and they said, oh, we would think for sure you could because we think for sure, but they are doing market rate stuff. And I just thought I better ask. This is an opportunity to ask the people who are not just doing market rate luxury projects. So 6.5% is kind of where you last saw it or found it shaking out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in response to the question of whether the Ready exercise was an exercise, it truly is an exercise. It was a conversion of an office space to residential, which at some point is going to happen. But the real challenge in doing that as an affordable project is that you're going to see significant cuts in sale price. You're seeing that all over in the office market. But in the analysis of what you attribute to land and what you attribute to basis, it's really skewed. And that literally blew every pro forma out of the water because if it's a $12 million project now, and probably will be less, about 500,000 of that is in the building, and the rest is land, which doesn't get into basis.
Okay. If you're buying an office property for $12 million to redo it, you're not going to get the bulk of that cost, that expense, to be in your basis, which lowers your credits and makes everything harder.
Correct.
Okay. It's interesting because Shea they're redoing an office building that they owned, Shea Properties, as affordable in Southeast Denver. I wonder how they did that. Because, yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can look up on the assessor site and get a general idea of the value of the property. And it will divide out land versus building, and that can help. There are some folks who are doing office conversions, and they're trying to hit that 80% mark without doing tax credits. And they're doing very small studios with loft beds and, 250, 300 square foot units. They did look at this particular development, and the floor to ceiling heights weren't enough for them to loft the beds.
When you said people are trying to get that 80% mark, what does that number mean?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
I just mean,
But
what
these are
80% of
these
what?
are market ones, and they're picking up a lot of singles and students.
Okay. Oh, 80% AMI maybe.
So, you can search for Nichols development and see what some of the things are that they're doing in the market rate.
Okay. As in this charrette, in this site that you went over, Paul, is that land, it would be leased from Grand Junction by the Grand Junction Housing Authority. Is that correct? And then
That's correct.
if you were to award the project to someone to build it, would they then sublease the land from the Grand Junction Housing Authority, or would there be like an agreement made where you still own the land, the housing authority still has the land under the lease, and that's it, and then the builder is just kind of doing it as a for fee, like for service?
Yeah, generally the Grand Junction Housing Authority hires a third-party general contractor, but
Okay.
they are in the developer role.
Right. Okay.
The
Gotcha.
housing authority is.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I
Okay.
think it's a 100-year lease. I'm looking through my notes to confirm that, but it was a lease.
For probably just a nominal fee per year. Well,
I think so. I don't know if
I
they
think it was
shared that.
$10 a year. It
10,
wasn't
yeah.
much.
yeah. Awesome
Do you-
discussion. Any other questions related to any of the things? Again, the presentations will be available on the IHC website going
Okay.
forward. And
I have a million more questions, but I recognize that this is not the time to be saying, "Hey, here's a free class for me."
well,
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Mary and Paul. And
so we do still have some time. However, I'm sure that, well, I think I'm sure that Mary and Paul would be happy to, reach out to you, or if you want to reach out to them, they want to
yeah,
provide
Yeah,
their, if maybe
absolutely.
they want to drop their uh, uh, emails in the chat, that might be helpful.
okay, great. Yeah, I don't want to take lean on.
Always open to questions, anything I can do to help pass on knowledge. LIHTC is very complex. And, just make sure you've got your good development team and go for it, because it really is the only thing that will help get you in the ballpark of affordability.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and the lovely presentation. And
Thanks for
um,
attending.
I'll,
Mary, would you like to drop your email perhaps in the chat, if possible? And that way folks will have it if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah, thank you guys for the questions and attending.
Yeah, great discussion, great presentations. Really appreciate it. Um, and if there is really nothing else, again, thank you very much for attending. And again, thank you very much to our sponsor, Developmental Pathways. I hope everybody has a wonderful and prosperous new year. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
thank you, Tim.